Thank
They are
you.
good. Yes. And
You're very good.
good morning. Good morning. Good morning to everybody who is watching us on,
Good morning.
Good
yes,
morning.
also Facebook and LinkedIn. We are very happy to once again introduce to you our one and only. She's not only ours, but she's the one and only Binati Sheth. And Binati, thank you so very much for once again being on our show. We just shared with you, with Tim and I, we shared with you a love message to you, right? So how much we love that you're back, and how much,
Yes.
yes, we're looking forward to actually talking about Japanese books. So to
Yes.
everybody who hasn't met Binati yet, please go to LinkedIn and reach out to her. She has amazing short videos introducing
Her content is
quite
awesome. Yeah, I love
autism.
following
Thank you so
Binati.
Yes,
much. That warms my heart. I got feedback that you should do more entertaining stuff, and I'm like, I am not entertaining. I like to stick to my niche, and then that's it.
No, I think you are entertaining though. I
yes,
really like your flavor. You keep things moving fast, but you always have very
Yeah,
well thought out concepts and ideas that
yeah.
I don't know how old you are, but I know I'm old enough to be your dad.
31. I'm 31.
Okay. When I was 31, I was such a dumbass. I wasn't even close to you in the development of how I
Oh.
looked at things. So I'm always very impressed, like, oh man, the youngsters are okay. It makes me
I
feel good.
absolutely agree with you in how, like, even the newer generation that's coming after us, they're so sorted. Like, they don't take anybody's thing at all. And, on one hand, we could criticize it, but on the other, it's brilliant that they know how to define boundaries at such young ages.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Makes me hopeful. So thank you for that. You're like a kind of a ray of sunshine. When I read your
yeah.
stuff, I always feel good. So
Oh, thank you so
yes,
much.
yeah.
and right.
Time for
Yes,
our sponsors. We got to get that out of the way, but we love them, so we want to do this.
we want to do this. It's not an obligation. It always feels like a word of thank you, really, from the
Yes.
heart. So thanks a lot once again. A big shout out to our first sponsor, Kanachu.com, and also James Howell. So thank you very much, James. Thank you very much, Kanachu, for being our sponsors. For you who are
Yes.
watching us and you're hearing their name for the first time, Kanachu offers bilingual services to individuals who want to buy property, who want to sell real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama. So the company also does property management and investment property. So if you want to work with them, reach out to James at kanacho.com because James is there to help you realize your project. You can speak with him in either Japanese or in English, and yes, you should be sure that your needs will be met with a lot of
For
care.
sure. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
They're the best.
yeah.
All
So
right. And so that's it, right? Without further ado, we got the sponsors.
yes,
And I think we're ready for Bonatti to educate and entertain us. Edutain
Hmm.
us.
I
educate
I
us first. Yes.
I don't know about entertain. Okay, because when it comes to books, the number of tangents I go on is incredible. So comment section, be feel free to call me out whenever you're like, please come to the topic, lady, that type of thing. And of course, my hosts are used to it, but y'all's might not be. So I think based on like a little bit of conversation that we had going before the live link, Tim, what does what do we learn from books about the culture, so to speak? So
Mm.
I particularly gravitated, if I were to talk about just my experience as a reader, I particularly gravitated towards Japanese books because of largely speaking six things. The first thing that stuck out to me was the books were very, very minimalistic and they're very, very direct.
Oh,
So if you get your hand on one of these books, you can read them in one sitting. Like the directness of it all is not, uh, I suppose, something that gets in the way of cognition. It doesn't lead to a lot of confusion and it leaves so much room for your brain to short circuit later on. when you think about what you just read. So, one thing that I really appreciated about Japanese literature back in the day when I was encountering it for the first time was how minimalist it is and how direct it is. And I think it contributed to the number of books I picked up. You know what I mean? Like if you are starting with 600 pages that take you 2, 3 days or a week to finish, you're like, I have to read it. Let me go back. The barrier to entry is a bit more comprehensive, and I didn't have that happen for Japanese literature, which was
Mm-hmm.
great because you are getting such wonderful stories. Sometimes stories that don't have a conventional storytelling structure, but you still understand what is being talked about
Right.
100%. So I
Mm.
think that was brilliant.
I like the direct quote that you made because, those of us who work with Japanese culture, there's also an indirectness baked into the culture to keep the harmony. Although even that's a myth because if you're in an inner circle with Japanese family and friends, they're extremely direct, okay? But
Yeah.
outside of that context, they're very indirect. So when you tell me storytelling is indirect, I wonder maybe that's one outlet that allows them and gives them permission to be direct in their communication approach because they can't do it all day when they want to, but they can't. I don't know, just an observation. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense because when I was reading the short stories and maybe essays written by Ryonosuke Akutagawa, it somebody as outspoken as him, like by the time he died, he had around 150 stories in publication and so many others probably in works.
Yeah.
And um, when you read some of his stories, all of his anxieties, like he was extremely afraid of going insane, like his mother did. And
Right.
that kind of
Yeah.
drove him to do what he did with his life, specifically how he ended it. But I didn't see a lot of conversation about that coming from
Mm.
others about him. Maybe that could be other Japanese people being polite about a legend, but
Mm-hmm.
people do gossip about the other authors. So my guess is if Akutagawa was going around doing some
Mm-hmm.
of these things, other people would have written something about it that batshit crazy is behaving like batshit crazy, something of that sort. But
Yeah.
we don't see that, meaning everything about his day to day life probably was very, very normal before it turned into what it did. So his writing is where you can see all of these anxieties kind of reflect themselves. And one of the main reasons why uh, Yukio Mishima is the author that kind of sucked me into this particular phenomenon, where you read the story and then you go like a gossipy auntie and look up the life of the author. And you're like, "Ooh, was he writing about this from his life? Like, is this what this was about in the story?" And then you're like, oh my God, yes, yes, it was. So the directness of it all, I think, because there was, I, not Japanese, don't live in Japan. So maybe I'm speaking out of terms. But from everything that I've observed, as you say, unless you are inside, and it takes a lot of effort to get inside, they are not going to be open with you. And I understand why that is the case given what I've read about their history. So
Yeah,
literature.
I think one important point, and I
Hmm,
think Maya would agree with me.
hmm,
In Japan, they can be indirect,
hmm,
but the pressure is on the listener here to decipher what's being said, and that knowledge of the high context culture
hmm,
often gives you a pretty good hint of what was said, what was intended, what the
Mm.
intended. Not always. Sometimes there's leeway,
hmm,
but so how would I say? In my country, for example, when communication occurs, if the listener didn't understand, then it's the sender's fault.
hmm.
In Japan, I think there's a bigger burden on the listener
Yeah.
to
Yes.
correctly interpret what's being said because of the language structure and the communication patterns, right?
Of
Yeah.
course.
So that's part of the equation. So while it's ambiguous, if taking the words at face value, based on what wasn't said, it's not that ambiguous. There's that too going
Mm.
on,
Yeah.
Hmm.
if that makes sense, right?
Mm.
Yeah. And I somehow don't see that in the books. I maybe this is
Which is interesting. Yeah, that's
it's
interesting.
interesting. I don't see it in the books. Like one of the modern books that I've loved is Chitoran, Breast
Mhm.
and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. And she has made commentary on the fact that in vitro fertilization for single women is not an option in Japan. And women have to resort to unconventional techniques
Mhm.
to have a baby when they're not dating somebody or married to somebody.
Mm.
And
I know a few people in that
Mm.
situation. Yes,
I looked it up because I could not believe it. Japan is supposed to be a developed country. I just assumed that IVF was available because we have IVF available in India with our
right,
conservative culture and everything for single women as well. And people will look at you with like "Ugh," eyes, but the government won't stop you from making that choice. So it was
right,
very shocking to read that book. And she does a lot of subtle things with the Osaka and the Tokyo dialect. The
right.
sister who
Mm.
lives in the city and the sister who lives in the town and all of that. She does that subtly. But largely speaking, she does not pussyfoot around the elephant in the room, which
Mm.
is talking about how hard it is for people to still make fundamental rights about their bodies. And she
Mm.
uses the entire fictional narrative to get it through. It was done so brilliantly and like genuinely so directly, but
Huh.
not directly in a way that it slaps you. If we take
Yeah,
a book
Mm.
from the Americas, which is Great Gatsby, Gatsby kind of spits in the face of the big American dream with his
yeah,
book, but
yeah,
Fitzgerald
yeah,
doesn't slap you with that. He is so sneaky about that
yeah.
going on, and yet he's not indirect about it. So something very very similar was pulled off by Miyako Kawakami. And it's not just a phenomenon, I think, for newer authors. I think it's been a trend that authors have been following, that we have to be careful about communication in real life. I don't know how true that is, but it seems to be the case. People put too much pressure on themselves about the words. It seems like that. And
Yeah.
we are not going to do that while we write our books or
Mhm.
while we create our media, because something similar is observed in manga.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read a lot of books from Japanese by Japanese authors either, because of many reasons. For me, reading Japanese takes longer than reading English, or reading any of the. Whatever. So, but the thing is that the one book which I actually started reading and finished in the very beginning when I came here and I was still learning Japanese was the book Ran Melos. In Japanese, it is Hashire Meros.
Okay.
And it is a book about a young guy, who is trying to save his friend's life. And it was for me because I was still very new to the Japanese culture at that time. And that, the narrative is about the person, how he actually perceives himself, about his inner life and everything, his friend's life and so on. And it was just so difficult for me because it was both very direct and indirect at the same time. I had
Hmm.
difficulty once again understanding who, the subject of the sentences of this, or the subject
Hmm.
the protagonist was, first of all, because of the Japanese grammar, of course, and
Yes.
I mean, back home in my native language, we always know who is the doer, right? We have all
Yeah.
the grammatical codes, and conjugations and so on to let you know. And as Tim said, there is no mistake there. But with the Japanese, it was so unbelievably difficult for me, and I was
Hmm.
like, how can how can I ever live in this country because I don't
Oh,
understand people? are saying,
Yeah. And
I think
yeah,
there's a
it's
language element here because Gujarati, which is the language I speak, has
right.
very similar grammar structure to Japanese. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have this problem that you mentioned ever because
nice, interesting.
the
Yeah,
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 it's I never thought and this is fascinating because you never really know that you possess a superpower till someone says something. You're like, this is why I didn't short circuit the way I was supposed to because everyone keeps mentioning
Mm-hmm.
the grammar is very, very trippy. And I was like, why am I not tripping? I used to have such a massive complex about that. Like, I am so smart. Turns out it's because of the language
Right.
that I have as my lingua franca, which
oh,
is
that's so
so
Mm,
funny.
yeah.
Hey, I wanted to touch on what just Maya you used an expression, and I like it. I agree with it. You said directly indirect, or both direct and indirect, right? And to people who don't live in Japan or don't understand Japanese culture, it's kind of a like what are you playing both sides of the fence? Like how is that possible? And yet
Mm.
those of us who are in it see it. Like I see it now. This quick story, like I see it a lot, even at home, right? So I was having dinner with my mother in law and my wife, and my
Mm.
mother in law had just finished going through old photo albums, and there was a picture of me that she pulled out, when we were getting married, and she said in Japanese, "Tim, you used to be really handsome." Right? And Kurumi and my wife and I, we just burst out laughing, right? So of course, I being the smartass American, I said, "Oh, used to? Are you saying I'm not handsome anymore?" And she just looks at me and she goes, and
Oh
said
my
nothing. Okay, that is directly indirect. That example of her communication style. It was very clear what she was saying to me, but she
yes.
didn't say it.
Yes. Yes. No,
So that
I
stuff is baked in everywhere, like So,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yes. Yeah. It's
and
really
for the
fascinating.
record, I was never handsome, okay? But I'm just telling you what my mother-in-law said. But
So
okay,
you,
back to the subject at hand.
you should show that picture to us and let us judge.
Okay,
Yes. We should do that thing that Mark Zuckerberg did, which led to the invention of Facebook, which is hot or not.
Mm.
okay,
We will rate the photos
Right.
and then maybe we could create, which is such a random tangent. But
Mm.
yeah, I think that's it. We can maybe call this indirect directness,
yeah,
which if you know, you know. If you don't, well, good luck to you
right, right.
with these books. Because I think that's it, right?
Uh,
Pachinko, a book from Korea, it's getting
yes.
very popular because Netflix has made a show now, and the show is apparently very well made. I haven't seen it
Mm.
yet, but I've read Pachinko, the books, and for many people, that is exactly what is happening. They're like, why are they taking stuff the way that they are? Because I will end up spoiling the book, and I don't want to do that, so I'm being very careful. And it's precisely what we experience with Japanese books as well. It is indirectly direct. If you get it, you get it. It's like the secret language that is spoken in a family, right?
Mhm.
If you know what the secret language represents, you're having the time of your life. If you are an outsider, you'll just like keep
Yeah,
looking at your watch, like when is it getting over? When is it getting over? That type of thing.
Yeah.
So that interesting. Like this is why I love talking to both of you. Every single time I think I have enough perspectives on a topic, and then you are like, no, here, take a few more.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
What you mentioned about directness. So there is actually an author who is Japanese, but he grew up in the United Kingdom, and so several years ago he got, I think, the Nobel Prize for Literature.
That's Kazuo Ishiguro. I was like, you're probably talking about Ishiguro, but I was waiting.
I am, yes, and I love his books, especially a couple of them. One of them which really, really just haunted me for months after I read it is Never Let Me Go.
Oh
And
my God. I
yeah,
agree.
it's just, and once again, because of this indirect, so he describes the life of those people in the book, right? And how they gradually leave the community, and you never got the direct explanation of what that happens until the very end.
Yeah.
And I mean, he grew up in the United Kingdom, but his Japanese genes and maybe the family, his Japanese parents actually got him to the point where he's so skillful actually of what's that, conveying
Yeah.
all that, the it's not the tension but that desperation of,
Mm.
and also acceptance of what is happening
I
to
think
characters.
if I were to reword it slightly,
Mm-hmm,
to show multiple emotions with one sentence. I
mm-hmm,
think this is what Japanese authors do very well. You can get whatever emotion you are picking up out of one sentence,
mm-hmm,
depending on when you are reading the book. And I think the concept.
Economy of thought. It's like
yeah,
a lot of is communicated in very few words. And I mean, I guess it's not surprising because they got the haiku tradition where they limit the number
Yes.
of syllables. So I like that's kind of baked in as well, don't you think? That
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
I think brevity is a skill. You can be descriptive. It's very easy to be descriptive. You just
yeah,
let your mouth and your brain connect and just disassociate. You can be descriptive. It's very
yeah,
easy to be a communicator when you're descriptive. Uh,
mm-hmm,
but it is so hard to do that when you are limited. But this is why something I tell my authors when they are facing blocks. It depends on what block they are facing. But I force them to put constraints on themselves. And somehow the
mm-hmm,
yes,
block goes away. Because when you allow your brain to roam free, it roams free. It's not a bad thing all the time, but
right.
brevity,
Sometimes, yeah,
constraints.
right.
Sometimes when you are trying to convey something very, very specific, and I think this is where the rigorous Japanese way of life helps them, right?
oh,
It's,
Maya and I have talked about this because we were talking about the idea that once you create constraints, people get more creative.
yeah,
And and Japanese culture tends to have a lot of constraints.
I
And
absolutely
they
agree.
are so brilliant at coming up with these novel. I'm just talking about like in my world where I work, manufacturing. They come up with these super simple, elegant solutions, high impact, low cost, and they kept it within this tight
mm,
box of constraints. That
Yes,
requires immense creativity. But I kind of
I
went off
absolutely agree.
track. Yeah.
mm,
I think
yeah,
with a lot of these things, constraint based creativity specifically, I think it takes time to mature. And because of the
Yes.
life cycle of products and service markets and all of this, many times these solutions don't really get time to mature, which
Right.
is why we don't
Right.
really see their brilliance play out on the
Yeah.
big world stage. But if
Yeah.
you really look at it, yeah, there's a reason why Japanese industries are unshakable in certain
mm-hmm,
places, even though Chinese counterfeit products are coming in to offer replacements. People are like, yeah, we cannot do away with this because if
mm-hmm,
this falters, the rest of my thing also falters.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think that has to be the culture that
right,
from what I speculate, again, don't know. Another thing I think you'll find this interesting. One of the 6 points that I found is about plot and process. Right, books are equally plot as well as process oriented, and in non-Japanese books, you will see the question why answered in the book. Whereas in
mm,
Japanese books, you will see the question how answered. Like,
Yeah. That makes
any book
sense.
you have read from
Process
a Japanese
oriented.
author, and why is the author trying to say something, or why is it this thing that the author is saying? This is what you will get from non-Japanese books. And then Russian literature and Japanese literature is like, no, we will answer the how. Uh,
Ah,
so
Yeah.
it's
interesting.
fascinating.
Russian literature too.
Yeah, I from what
Oh,
I have read so far.
interesting.
I mean, I'm
Interesting.
still a noob there. I've not
Yeah.
Mm,
gone enough into it because I have to still rely on translators to read in Russian. I cannot just
right.
read it.
Yeah.
But
And
in the workplace, the focus is on the how more than the why, based on
hmm.
my experience in a Japanese workplace. Yeah.
So
The method
the
is
same,
like,
the same in books as well. They are focused on
yeah,
how. Like take Keigo
yeah,
Higashino's Devotion of Suspect X, which is a very incredible. I think you both might enjoy reading this book. Um, the murder happens. You know who's done the murder. Galileo. This is a series. Detective Galileo. He investigates things like that. Uh, he also knows who's done the murder, but he doesn't know how the murder happened. And the
ah,
entire book is him figuring out how did this person get murdered because it is so mind boggling. It is so obvious, and yet you're like, you start doubting yourself, right? Because
yeah,
it can't be that simple. It can't be that complicated. And it's such a brilliant way of
you know,
using the how something
Mm,
is done, like not who done it. You know who's done it. It's a how done it, which is, I think, fascinating. It is so
right.
fascinating. So I think it directly links into the direct indirectness of what they focus on with their books. And I think what they focus on is how. Because as a culture, I think maybe because of, which is another point, geography. I think the geography of Japan kind of affects the narrative a lot, no matter what book you are reading, because not just talking about descriptions. I think the geography of the place, because Japan is small
Right.
and
and
it
mountainous. So there were a lot of separate
there's a
little
lot of places
localization.
you
Yeah,
can't live in, right?
Yes.
yeah,
And uh, there's so many disasters happening because they're
yeah,
literally on the ring of fire. Entirety of Japan is on the ring of fire.
They
They're
are.
surrounded by the
yes,
ocean,
Mm,
and I think it's humid as hell. So you have pestilence also doing its thing.
right.
So I think the geography of the place, it's beautiful. Yes, it is beautiful. But it's, I think, in many ways, when you don't have the comforts of modern life, so to speak, it's
Mm,
hard to think about everyday survival.
oh
And
yeah.
I think it shows in the work that has come out that people have dealt with so much real world problems. They're like, oh, your heart is broken. Wah, wah. Big deal.
oh yeah,
I think
right, right. No, no, yeah, yeah, and there's this common theme about Japan is the Japanese being risk averse, and some people that's out of vogue now. We're supposed to say uncertainty avoidance, I guess, because it has more syllables and it sounds smarter.
yes,
I think
it's
they're the
more about
same. I think they're the same thing, but because you can't really avoid uncertainty, that's like a given. Life is not. It's there, and I
yeah,
feel like the Japanese look at the world and they go, okay, we know where the risk is. So within our own control, let's try to minimize the risk when we can, because
Yeah.
we can't control the
yeah,
hurricanes, the earthquakes, the landslides, the tsunamis, but we can focus on this. And I think some of that, maybe that comes from that reality, possibly.
I absolutely agree
Mm,
100% because I think history, geography, these things we don't really look at them as serious things, but they're difficult to overcome. You
right.
cannot
Right.
overcome where you come from. You cannot overcome the line that you descend from. It's we can avoid it. There's definite possibilities of you avoiding it, but you can't escape it. At some point, it's going to catch up to you, right? It
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
it's not
Mm,
something that, oh yeah, I'm seeing one wonderful book recommended, and there's a comment by Deborah Ann as well. Kobo Abe's Women in the Dunes. I love that book. because Kobo Abe's writing very negative, like very post-bomb Japan writing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
very necessary writing in my opinion. But uh, that's the thing, right? Like, uh, why does something of this sort come in an author's head? That is what fascinates me about a lot of the narratives that are at play. So, yeah, I think geography, history, very difficult to overcome. Are you
Yeah.
going to be reading the comment, the big one, Maya?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
That's
first we got to take a quick break for our wonderful sponsor.
Please do.
yes. Yes.
So go ahead,
So,
Maya.
okay, thank you. Another big thank you, and it's a real shout out to Hana. Hana Uroshizawa Howell and Houze Inc. Houze Inc. is also a company that works in the field of real estate, and it offers customized services in home design, construction, and renovation, also commercial building construction. Once again, bilingual services. So if you are not really confident in your Japanese, reach out to Hannah and talk with her in English. So she will make sure that your needs and your questions are answered so that you can go forward with your project. So it is once again Houze Inc. and Hannah Uroshizawa Howell. Hannah's contact details are in the description of the video on YouTube, and you can always reach out to her on LinkedIn as well. So please do, if you have such a project in mind, and work with Hannah and Houze Inc. Yes, so, and Binati, once again, thank you very much for bringing our attention to the comment of Deborah. So, Deborah writes, I had to learn about communicating in Japanese in Japan because I worked in theater. I directed plays that win awards and appeared as an actress in plays that win awards as well. And I am working in that way. Oh no, and working in that way enabled my ability to read the meaning of many situations.
Mm,
So
fascinating.
it
Yeah.
is
Nothing
fascinating.
like experience. Experience is so
One
important.
fascinating thing I found about Japanese theater is where they laugh at things, right? They like we laugh at the punchline. I with Japanese humor, I don't see that. Like, first of all, the concept of the punchline, they go more slapstick from what I feel. So I totally get what she's alluding to with the theater thing because
But it's slapstick in the more popular sense. But if you go back and you look at Rakugo, like I in college I studied Japanese comic storytelling. The
mm,
process of telling the story is the fun part. And the
mm,
thing is, everybody knows what the final punchline is anyway because I'm talking about
exactly,
the classic stories, right?
yeah,
And they want to enjoy the ride to
mm,
get to the punchline. They already know, unless it's the first time they saw it, right?
right.
Um, so I see the process orientation there, and I know Deborah was involved in things like Bundaku, and so that's old, more traditional, and what was the intermission at Bundaku? Maya, refresh. I can't think of the word. Deborah, jump in and tell me. It's a comic relief part of the show, right? Um, I forgot what it is, but I'm
I've
sure
never
she'll let
seen
us.
one, so I have no clue. But maybe if they
Yeah,
start
Deborah.
streaming these shows online, I'm hoping some of this
Yeah,
authentic content finds its way to
but the
these
Mm.
stuff on TV now, the slapstick and my wife doesn't get it. She looks at these shows and she thinks they're silly. Of course, she was in America for 30 years, so I'm sure that has something to do with it. Um, so even I'm seeing generational differences as well. Yeah, in,
I,
within Japan.
I would not know about that at all. But I particularly one thing I find very fascinating is the presence of the himbo character, like the handsome, stupid male character, and
Yeah.
it's always there. And I'm like, I always wonder why that is. I know they are there to provide comic relief, but why always?
Kyogen. Kyogen. I just remember it's Kyogen.
Okay.
Kyogen is the name of the, yeah, it was the comic relief in Bundaku,
Okay,
not Bundaku, what is it? No, I'm sorry, no, no
okay,
and
no.
Kyogen. Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Please, it's fine. The more you get to learn, because this is localization knowledge. This you can't read on Google. This you have to talk to people who live in places.
Yeah,
So, yeah. So coming back to what we were talking about, the geography definitely affects, which leads me to another observation, which is Japanese literature. Not so much right now, but at least the one that the older kind used to be reactive. It always used to respond to something, whether
Mm-hmm.
it was fear of technology or fear of not fear, anxiety around massive number of changes that happened, be it changes with the Meiji era, or if we go way back to the first novel ever written in human history, Genji no Monogatari.
yeah,
Even
Genji.
that, it is responding to something. It is
Yeah,
responding to, I think, the many shades of love that people experience, and yet everybody's unhappy. So I find that to be fascinating in older Japanese literature. Now it's way diverse, but the older
yeah,
literature, I think it was very responsive, and I do feel that sometimes they are responding to, uh, in some instances, Chinese literature, in another instances, Western literature. And I don't know why. Was this envy? Was this wanting to emulate what you have been inspired by? I don't know why, but it does seem very responsive to me,
Mm.
reactive to me. So,
yeah.
what are your takes
Um,
on it?
yeah, I was years ago when I was in college. I was studying Rakugo. I was trying to study the roots of Rakugo, right? And I found this book. It was an anthology, and the chapter in it was by a academic named Barbara Ruch, and it was Japan in the Muromachi Age, and then the subtitle was "The Making of a National Literature." Okay, and her
Mm,
thesis was these traveling jongleurs, these storytellers, many of them Buddhist priests, were
mm,
spreading the word to the illiterate masses in Japan
mm,
because until then the elite were practitioners of Buddhism, but now they were spreading it, right? And they were
Mhm.
telling the vocal arts. She called it the cinemization of Japanese literature, so
mm,
people could access these stories, right? And during the Sengoku Jidai, the Muromachi period, they're traveling all over, spreading the word. And according to Barbara Ruch, all the themes, the general themes that were created in that period, fed
mm.
into all the literature in Japan that ensued. Now, again, modern literature, I
This
agree
makes so
with
much
you.
sense then.
It's getting more diverse. So if you ever get a chance, just Japan in the Muromachi age, Barbara Ruch, right? And the making of a national literature. If you Google it, you
Okay.
can find it's not that long, but it was very informative to me. In
I will definitely check it out, because when you were speaking of this, no, I was reminded of something that kind of links to India as well. Rabindranath Tagore is a very popular writer from India, and he's Bengali, and his work has been internationally acknowledged. And he refused to write in any other language but his own. So Yasunari Kawabata, he used to write in English because, uh, not all the time, but I think based on what you mentioned, I think maybe he was taught something, and that is what he used to stick to. And
yeah,
then he talked to Tagore, and from that day on, he started talk to Tagore or read about Tagore. I am not sure about that. From that day on, he started writing in Japanese,
mm,
and I think there's something very fascinating about this, because when you've been taught to toe the line, which I think is the case with the culture, toe the line, do the thing that you have to do, and write a fancy little poem about it or do a flower arrangement. something
Right.
of the sort, and then go to sleep. Uh, when you have been taught that, and then you see somebody do something very, very against that, you're like, oh, he did the thing that we're not supposed to do, and nothing happened. In fact, he won a Nobel Prize. That could be me. Why, if he can write in Bengali and win
Mm.
prize, why can't I write in Japanese and do the same? And even Kawabuta does, Yasunari Kawabata does get a Nobel Prize. I forget which book. Which book got him the Nobel? Was it the Izu one or was it the Shimamura one? I
Mm.
forget which book specifically won the Nobel. But one of his books did, and it is in Japanese.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
this thing you mentioned, I'll definitely check this book out. Please tell me the name again because I forgot.
The
Uh,
name of the
The Rakugo reference you gave me.
actually it wasn't Rakugo. So the book is an anthology, Japan in the Muromachi Age,
Okay.
and there's
Yes, I.
many authors, right? So there's one chapter. The chapter is titled "Medieval Jongleurs," and I don't
mm.
know if I know that's a French word. I'm probably not saying it right. And the making of a national literature.
Hmm.
That's the title of that chapter. So
Ah,
Mhm.
it was it
making
puts
of a
so much
national.
into
Sounds fascinating.
perspective. And everybody says that Rakugo started in the Edo period. Nothing just starts. There's
No.
always it's
Exactly.
always evolving from something. So it has Buddhism roots, and it comes from these sermons that these these priests would teach, but they did it in an entertaining way so they could engage the common folks
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
tell and make their point through storytelling. But a lot of it they used humor and other techniques, and a lot of them use visuals. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of Japanese. Again, I like her word, the cinemization of Japanese storytelling, because
Mhm.
it wasn't. So Rakugo, it's gestures, and you still got a fan as your prop, and you got a towel, and you can use it in different creative ways. But there were other ways where they used picture books. You know, I mean, there's a very rich vocal tradition, but
Yeah.
again, that fed into Japanese literature, and there's these like general large arching themes that you can still see, at least back in the 80s until modern day. You know, I don't know if I'm sure some of it it's not going to go away. It's
Yeah.
there.
It's
Exactly.
not
Because
going to.
Yeah.
you are inspired by those who come before you, right? You build on their work.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to see where it comes from. You don't have to. Most people don't. Like even in their own culture, you don't know where a lot of your thinking came from or your assumptions.
Yeah.
But if you study your own culture, then you start understanding, oh my gosh, this is just my culture. It's not necessarily other cultures think this way. Like, you know,
Exactly.
that's the tadpole turning into a frog and jumping out of the pond and then going back. Now they know the difference between water and air and dry land, you know. That was my theme in coming to Japan. I was a
Mhm.
tadpole when I got here, you know. So
But
Yeah.
I think that's the power of books, right?
yes.
Books are very, very permanent, unlike social media posts. And whether a book is good or not, I mean, I try to restrain myself from saying that this book is great, this book is
I
bad,
know.
things of the sort, because I think every book serves a purpose. Whoever
Mm.
wrote the book, for them, whatever
Yeah.
is in the book, it's important. It can be the worst thing you have ever read,
Yeah.
but it is
Yeah.
important for this one person who took the time, put in the effort to compile whatever this is. And if you are a proactive reader, you are going to find the value in that book. I mean, it's going to be hard for certain books, but if you really, really, really put in the effort, there's no such thing as bad books. I like to
Yeah.
live with that delusional thought.
Oh yeah.
Delusion.
And it always depends on the the stage of life the reader is at, and also their environment, what they're looking for. Because
Yeah.
at some point, I can also say that when I was a teenager and I tried to read some books, I just couldn't continue. And then 20 years later, when I tried to read them, I finished them, almost in 24 hours, right? Each
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's also about, your preparedness, how ready you are to read that particular book. And it's
Yeah,
again experience in what you're looking for. So as you say, it's very difficult to say that a book is great or a book is bad because of that. It also depends on the reader's condition at the time of reading.
I
Yeah.
agree.
And the more general theme that we've talked about before is the power of storytelling. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, as in college, I had to read these dry academic anthropology books, which
Mm-hmm.
talk about people almost like they're specimens,
Mm,
and rather than human beings. But the storytelling that
mm,
conveys these same concepts are much more powerful because people, first of all, they're engaged, they relate to them, and it sticks. If
mm.
it's wrapped in a well told story, you learn something deeply about the culture. And I think literature is kind of a shortcut.
It
It's a
is.
short. It's a better option than those dry anthropology books that I hate, and that was my
Yeah.
field. So
Mm. No, I think we should talk about her. We should talk about Murasaki Shikibu because uh, very good example Genji no Monogatari and Shikibu Nikki, which
Mm-hmm.
is Tales of Genji, the fictional account, and
Mm-hmm.
Diary of Lady Murasaki, which is like a journal. A lot of
Right.
it is lost, but the one that still survives to this date is like because we Murasaki Shikibu is a pseudonym.
Mm-hmm.
She was
right,
born to the Fujiwara family. That's
Right.
not her
right,
name. The
right.
author is writing because I do believe that I don't know how true this is, but while I was learning the Japanese alphabet like years ago, this is how what I was taught, right? Hiragana from Wikipedia of all places. Hiragana is curly because everybody uses hiragana.
Mm-hmm.
Katakana is angular because only men use katakana because katakana employs foreign words. Women don't have to interact with foreigners,
Oh, the old
so
school.
you don't need to
Yeah,
learn it.
gotcha.
And because kanji was repurposed Chinese characters, uh, women
Yeah,
were generally not allowed to use it. And I was like, what?
Mm.
Alphabet means sexism. This was very
yeah,
revolutionary to me.
yeah.
So I think the fact that the first piece of writing that exists ever comes from this priestess called Enidwana. And basically she invokes Inanna, who is a goddess, and she's like, Inanna, curse all of them bitches. That's basically the first known writing known to
Okay.
mankind. Then you have something like Genji no Monogatari, which is the first known novel format that we know of so far.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It is a female writer using the female gaze to tell us the story of Hikaru Genji in like 54 chapters. Uh, to showcase shades of love, to showcase what is now very very popular on LinkedIn as Mono no Aware. Everybody has
Oh,
written a post on Mono no Aware. I'm like, oh, stop it guys,
I,
stop
I
it with
know. I know.
bastardizing Japanese philosophy like this.
yeah.
I
So,
agree. I agree. I
and
agree. Yeah, mono no
the fact that without having knowledge of plot and structure and characterization and all of this, and if we do critically analyze Genji no Monogatari with all the literature knowledge we have now, it seems like the book doesn't have structure, but it does have so much structure and it says
Mm.
so much without being very very direct about it, because I think it has like 800 Waka poems within the narrative. To have 800 poems, one plot where this prince who was born to a concubine, therefore making him slightly illegitimate, uh, goes around finding the perfect woman for him who resembles his mother. This is such layered onion to have as a plot. Then he
Yeah.
finds a 10-year-old, which he kidnaps and turns into his wife, who he repeatedly cheats on. And
Oh,
everybody's miserable.
okay.
this is the plot, right? This is roughly the plot, and you're like, if you just listen to that, it's like, why is this lady gushing about this book? However, when you sit down and read the story, it makes
Mm-hmm.
so much sense why this book is revered and why this book led to like an entire subgenre of literature being created, which I would
Yeah,
argue is the most popular genre of literature in existence, the
yeah.
novel.
The
The
novel.
novel,
and
Mm-hmm.
and
the
and
novel.
she did that by being observant, because what we do know is she was in the court,
Mm-hmm.
and she was put she used to write poetry, the kind that I think Japanese noble women were expected to write back in the day. And instead of just doing that, she was observing things and she was cataloging them. What remains of her journal is how we know this. And then
Mm-hmm.
instead of doing what everybody else was probably doing, which is gossiping about it and going about their business, she layered it into a fictional story. And that's
Right.
how we know how things are during the Heian. Is that how it's
The
pronounced?
Heian,
Heian. Okay, yes,
Hey,
okay.
Heian Jidai. Yeah,
The because we are specifically told about how Hikaru smells amazing again and
yeah,
again and again. And
right.
you're
yeah,
like, why is this mentioned so many times? Why is the author mentioning the smell of one character again and again and again and again? It tells you something, right? It tells you people during that time probably didn't use perfume. Very
Mm-hmm.
small
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
But
Yeah, yeah,
the novel gives you so many insights of this sort, and the different forms of love that are on display. And
All
I don't, I mean, Hikaru is what we youngins like to call a fuck boy, right? And uh, very crude way of putting it, but that was normalized. Having concubines as royalty was normalized, and it
yeah,
didn't really have stigma associated to it. But
yeah,
he was miserable. You assume that you soak into the finer parts of life all the time, like you do, because he does do drugs, and he has all the perfume and all the ladies, and he is smart. He writes very good poetry. He's also strong. He checks all the boxes of the conventional stereotypical hero. He should be happy, but
yeah,
he isn't. He has
right.
everything that most of us assume under material comforts to be happiness. He has
Mm-hmm.
it all. He's not happy because I think the author is making a commentary on the, I suppose, attachment detachment philosophy that we see in Buddhism.
All
That
right.
we always have attachment,
Mm,
and
yeah,
no matter how hard we try, unless we get detachment, there's no happiness. When you are obsessively looking for love, which is what Hikaru does, till he
mm,
finds Murasaki, not Murasaki the author, Murasaki the 10-year-old girl that he kidnaps and turns into his wife. So
mm,
problem. But
yeah,
I mean, okay, we should not judge history with the morality of the present. So we
yeah.
let that go. Um, he still does not experience joy and happiness
Right, right,
mm.
and
right.
comfort and peace.
And those are age-old themes if you think about it. You know, and
Exactly. And the fact that she compressed all of this and invented like Mono no Aware, which is brilliant. She did it without the internet. She did it when so much of
yeah,
literature was probably policed from her because of her gender.
yeah,
And it's done so well that you have some rando in India obsessing over it
yeah.
Oh,
And
24
but you
hours.
mentioned gender, and earlier you mentioned observant, and it was funny when you mentioned that a light bulb went on because I was thinking, is it a coincidence that the first novel ever was written by a woman? And I think you
I
can
don't
make
think
an
it is.
argument. I think you
mm,
can make an argument that the situation they were put in
Yeah.
forced them to behave a certain way. And one was don't talk unless spoken to, and observe. And
Mm.
so now you've got this situation where a woman is observing what she's seeing, and she has the creativity and the talent to put it into words and write
Mm.
this novel. I'm saying, should we be surprised that it's a woman, or is it just a coincidence, a flip of a coin?
I think it comes back to that thing we talk about with constraints. She could
Yeah.
not use the conventional
Oh,
ways
good
to
point. Good
present
point.
her point of view in court. So what
Mm-hmm.
Right.
she did is she literally invented a literature genre. She was like,
Within her
"Hmm,
constraints. Yeah.
this is
Oh,
new.
yeah.
They won't be able
Sure.
to put me in jail because I did something new." And that's what
Right.
happened actually. If you trace uh, the I suppose way some of the books are talked about before the whole Japan versus China thing happened. I think Japan was everything related to the royalty in Japan was very, very influenced by Chinese.
Mm.
Heavily,
Heavily.
actively.
Mm.
Yeah, and they didn't used to see it as an insult to be compared to China, which has become the
Right.
case now.
Right.
But it
Mm.
wasn't the case back then.
Yeah.
So
Back then, it would have been called cultural appropriation, but we won't go into that can of worms. But go ahead. And
I
by the way,
think
I'm all for it. I think it
I will
raised.
get all three of us cancelled if we discuss that topic.
Yeah, we won't go there, but it did literally, it raised Japan's level of culture in a very short period of time. Confucianism,
Yeah,
Buddhism, kanji, which was trickling in anyway. So Shotoku
trade.
Taishi.
because
Shot,
because
yeah,
because of the trade thing and access to the Silk Road, they got
yeah,
culture in brief. Like culture from all over the world was
yes,
trickling down to them from those ships. It's
yeah,
if I were to put myself in their shoes, it makes sense why they were influenced and impressed by what they
yeah,
saw, because it's got to be amazing. You don't have any, you live in a forest, and then
yeah,
somebody gives you a laptop with a Netflix password. You're going to
yeah,
lose your mind
yeah,
because there's so much content there. There's so many stories, so many perspectives,
Mm.
things of the sort. Which also kind of reminds me why, once again, why Murasaki Shikibu was awesome. Because till this point of time, we only had myths and legends
Mm.
and
right.
uh, those kind
Good
of
point.
things.
Yeah, yeah,
And here, this woman is like, screw that. I will make a character, not a god, not a king, not a queen, a
Mm.
prince who is
Right.
going through some like subject selection. The
Mm.
amount of thought she would have put in for subject selection and to have brought in the plot, it's brilliant. The fact that I love your point. It is worth noting that it was a woman who wrote the first novel.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm going to think about this. I'm going to look it
And
up. And
and
I
and
have
I would tell. I've worked with a lot of men and women in my career, and I will just tell you my experience. It's anecdotal. Overall, women were much better communicators and collaborators than men, and I that both Americans and Japanese, in my
Yeah.
experience. I'm not saying it's true for everybody, but so it
Yeah.
makes sense to me the
Right.
communication side of it.
Mm. But you cannot help it actually, because throughout the evolution of the humankind, women have always stayed back, right? They have stayed around the fire and
Fruit picking and gathering, and yeah,
and everything. So, I mean, it's not sexist to say that, yeah, women have had to be better communicators. Um, so, but it's great. I mean, it still remains, right? It started
I
maybe
think it makes
millennia
sense.
back.
We have to be more collaborative, and I shouldn't say we, because we don't know what it was like for women back in the day.
right, right,
Right.
right, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely don't know what it was like, because um and we can maybe talk about one, like, it's not a book, it's a show based on a book. One of the main reasons why I loved Shogun, it's the whole, that whole scene. where Mariko talks to her husband with
Mm-hmm.
like this camellia flower in the background. I was like, oh my God, this is so brilliant. Because I believe there's juxtaposition done before that camellia, when it falls, it's like a head being chopped off.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't really present camellia flowers. And Mariko had a full on like arrangement while she was drinking tea with her abusive husband, which is basically such an indirectly direct way of saying, I hope you die. And I couldn't get over the fact that she is communicating without communicating. And then I
Yeah,
started looking for some of these signs, right, in some of the books after watching that particular scene, because I'm like, I'm sure this exists. And sure enough, I found it in Yukiguni, Snow Country
Right.
by Yasunari
uh,
Kawabata. The way
yeah,
he rejects the concubine is he doesn't say you're too old for me now. He just calls her woman instead of girl, and he walks away.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
some of these communication patterns, I think some of these communication patterns are very cultural, and
Yes,
whether we like to admit it or not, given the modern moralities we find ourselves in, there is a gender component to it, there is a class component to it,
Yeah.
and it is going to rear its beautiful and ugly head depending on
yeah,
how you see it.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
it's so funny because there's this cliche that, for example, a Japanese man, he won't say, "Will you marry me?" in his proposal. What does he say, Maya? I forget what the cliche is, but it's like, "I want you to make miso shiro for me in the morning," which of course is very sexist, but
Right.
it's something like that, right? And then I remember in college, the hardest course I ever took was Japanese literature in Japanese, and our teacher was Japanese, and we were going over this scene where the husband and the wife have this disagreement, and she tells him she's not happy because of the way she arranges her flowers in the genkan when he comes in. They're arranged in a non-harmonious way, and that's supposed to be the hint that his wife is ticked off. And then they have their argument, and then afterwards he says, "Make me some tea." Now, according to my Japanese professor, he goes, "That's he's saying I love you, and we're past this now. We're moving on." Now, that was his interpretation of it, but the fact that making me tea or making me miso shiru sounds like extremely indirect ways to say something to get your message. And I
Yeah.
know it's 9:04, so I apologize for extending this, but I
Yeah.
just love these conversations. I could do this for a few more
I
hours
told
with
you,
you.
right? We won't be done. I
Yeah.
was going to talk about Natsume Soseki. I was going to talk about Ryonosuke Akutagawa, Asuma Dazai, so many.
But
And
we
it's
derailed you. I'm sorry. We could, but so we got to have you come back again to finish your talk.
I
How's
am
that?
such a
Yeah.
clickbait. Yes,
Yes.
I always ensure that I have to do that.
Matsuoka gozaimasen. So,
No, I think that well, this is a topic which we can talk, a lot more about, and 1 hour is not enough, for sure. And I
Literally.
think that yes, when
I
we
had a
have
blast. I had so much fun. So thank you.
yes,
Same
so,
here. I mean, this thing that you told in the end, the novel
right,
has to be written by a woman. It's going to haunt me now. Tim,
It's a good
you are
theme.
my
It's
theme
something. Yeah, it
for
would be a good
days.
theme for you to
Thank you.
explore. I like it. So I look forward to your future posts about it.
yes.
No pressure.
But Tim,
Thank you.
before we finish, yes, I wanted to say about that story, which your Japanese teacher interpreted. And you have always talked about Kurumi-san, how she does things about you, for you, right? So
Right.
this, she does things for you. She doesn't tell you "I love you," but she does your favorite things. She cooks you your favorite food. She cooks. She brings coffee for
Exactly.
you. And this is the way the culture is here. Once again, it's
But to
not.
be fair, okay. Once in a while, not very often, when she's mad at me,
Mhm.
she starts cleaning and she starts bumping the vacuum cleaner. It's like a very loud cleaning. And I resist the temptation to say, "Honey, you're doing a great job," because I know she's mad at me. But it's very rare. But
Okay.
that's the other way of her displeasure. She doesn't mess with the flower arrangement. She goes for
Right.
the vacuum, bumping it around. But
I mean,
You
everybody,
use a symbol. Woman
uh,
is angry.
but
Cuts
I will say
people
this:
aggressively.
I'm not supposed to
Punctuated
say
things.
this because we're in Japan,
Yeah,
but
you
I am
do.
extremely lucky to have my wife. I can't believe
Oh.
she keeps me around, so I'm very happy that she does.
I think
So
life would be very, very boring if there's no disagreement.
no, you have to.
Yes.
People who say we never fight, first of all, that means one side is just keeping it all in and you're
yeah,
doing gaman, right? You
Mhm.
have to, fight. I don't like the word fight, but there's disagreements, right?
Yes.
yeah,
And you work it out. That's how you keep going. You work it
Of
out,
yes,
course.
right?
yeah.
And
But
so,
another thing that I really love here is that people know that there are disagreements, and
yeah,
when you have a disagreement with somebody, the interpretation always goes in the way that you trust that person enough to disagree with them and to show your disagreement. So
Yeah.
because you don't show
and
your
to love
disagreement,
them anyway, or to have them as your friend anyway. And
right?
yeah,
Yes. So you don't show your disagreement and your indignation to somebody whom you don't trust, to be able to talk with you and to talk it
yeah,
through, right? So, but anyway, yes, this is, I mean, a
way
fascinating,
past.
yes,
Too much
we're way,
fun. We're having too much fun. That's the problem.
we are,
That's
yes.
never a
But
problem.
yes, so Binati, let's continue because you've got the books we couldn't talk about. We need still need to talk about them. Okay, so let's do it once again. Continue the book Japanese books topic, and yes, as soon as your schedule allows, of course. Yes,
Sure.
yes. But thank you so very much for this. Really, thank you. And you know that you're yes, definitely one of our favorite speakers here,
Same
Oh
and
here.
yeah.
for
The
But
that.
don't tell
episodes
the
that
other
you guys
speakers,
did,
okay? We don't want anyone to get mad. This will be our secret. Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
No, the episode that you guys did on nutrition recently, that one was such an eye opener. Like
Other
the
nutrition.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, Jake's story.
Jake was
Yes,
awesome. He's great. Yeah. You
I
he's
gotta
was
have him
like,
on there.
this is so fascinating, and even the whole explanation about the new prime minister and everything, that I was like, I get to listen to this while I make lunch. This is
Oh,
incredible.
nice. Nice, nice, nice. Thank you. We appreciate that.
yes, very much so. All right, so then this is a promise. We'll continue the topic soon, and also we'll probably talk about well, not only other Japanese books, but also other aspects of the
We will talk
Japanese.
about I Am a Cat, and Maya
Right.
will hold the
Oh
cat.
yeah, okay, okay. I am a cat.
Yes, my cat. Oh, yes. Okay, thank you very much, Binati. And once again, before we say goodbye to everybody and wish them a
Our
happy mid-year,
sponsors.
yes, our sponsors, here we go with Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku or kanachu.com, where you can find James, and also Houze Inc., where you can find Hannah, and you can work with them, talk with them, and so have your projects taken care of. So thank you very much indeed to our sponsors. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who stayed with us. Binati, a huge thank you to you once again, and we're looking forward to having you with us again soon. Yes,
Yes.
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Shaka.